With so many different ideas floating around and so many revelations that people are having, I often say that we are in the apocalypse right now, which is the great revealing. It's really important to put things into a well-balanced perspective and really understand how everything ties together. Neil Kramer will be joining us here in just a few moments. He's a philosopher, esotericist, focusing primarily on spirituality, mysticism, and metaphysics. Neil explores the relationship between inner development and the many social and cultural factors that influence our everyday lives. Attention is drawn to embracing truth, confronting the negative, and transforming the self. His website is neilkramer.com. And looking through the schedule here at Truth Frequency Radio, it looks like he joined James Tracy just last week or the week before on March 21st.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he's been here on the station, TFR, before. But I'm really looking forward to getting into some of these information with Neil. Neil, do we have you on?
Yes, you do. Hello, guys.
Excellent. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining us. You know, as I mentioned, we are really living in the great revealing, and there are so many different ideas, alternative viewpoints, new age, parapolitical, et cetera, et cetera. How do we tie all these together? How do we really separate everything and understand what ultimately the truth is?
Well, that's quite a good question to begin with, isn't it? We need about 7 weeks to answer that one. Yeah, great question. So philosophy is a great power of discernment that is available to all of us. And in the proper sense of the word, the etymology of the word philosophy is simply someone who loves wisdom. Philo, love, soph or sophia or sophis means learned or wisdom. So we're not using it in the mainstream academically understood way, not strictly so, which is another type of philosophy, which is fine, but we're meaning it in the ancient classical sense, a time when the greatest philosophers underwent no formal degreed education. They studied and they lived and experienced, and they may even have apprenticed to various wise sages to help them in their metaphysical work, but it was always with a distinct emphasis on the individual and their harmony in creating balance with all the crazy things that were going on in the world. We tend to think it's just now. I mean, we're certainly tracking it better and articulating it better because of our technology. But it was, believe me, it was just as crazy in Egypt and ancient Greece, ancient Britain, ancient Persia. So the philosophers had to have these wizards or wise ards, they were called literally in Britain. So in this sense, I think, it's not just special people, it's anybody who has the internal impulse to inquire into the deep nature of things. They can rightly consider themselves a philosopher. However, the essential thing that marks the, what you would say, the common thinker from the wise thinker is discipline and experience, practice, focus, instinct. And some of these things can be learned and taught and given instruction in, and some of them certainly are instinctive and whatnot. So whilst we all share in it, some have a more natural flair than others, just like people who paint or draw or cook or play a musical instrument. Some people just come in and seem to have this prior sort of advantage, this God-given, talent for the thing. So when you add in the spiritual dimension and the mystical dimension to philosophy, then it starts to get very interesting, quite removed from the normal cloisters of Harvard or Oxford or Princeton, NYU, New York University, or any of those places, which are essentially studying the philosophy of other men, not really placing any, distinct or meaningful emphasis on the individual's power of knowing. So I use this phrase, philosophy for living, which encompasses the esoteric areas of life, which you guys talk about week in and week out, the spirituality, strong individualism, and the whole thing is designed to bring more truthfulness into life. Doesn't matter what you're talking about, whether it's the little things, home, work, relationships, insight, growth, or the bigger, more fantastical things like higher vision, dimensional projection, the art of transmutation, things like that. It affects all of those things. So as you can see here, within this, there's both very practical issues of life situations and the higher things in life. So you start to understand that the basic fundamentals lead to the higher things, the more magical matters. So deep esoteric secrets of the world come to us when we learn this art of philosophy, this art of discernment, an intimate kind of contact with reality. So, what my method of philosophy for living asks us each to do, really, one very simple thing as a matter of course, and it's this. When you look at a thing, a person, an event, an object, an image, an idea, very simply ask yourself, what is this? What is its true nature? What is the hidden core of this thing? Because you know as well as I do, whatever the mainstream usually defines as the nature of something is ordinarily very untrue. Just look around. So what we're told things actually are quite something different. So just, look around the world, examine the state of affairs, deeply distorted politics, fabricated terrorism, the sort of end of privacy, corporatism, the virus of liberal decadence that saturates the media, where everything is always good and nothing is better than anything else. And then on the other side, this, totalitarian debauchery of Europe and India and Africa and America. And, we're told, right? We're told that these things are democracy, fighting terrorism, embracing new technology, free market economies, modern socialism, modern conservatism, and they are not. They're nothing of the sort. So philosophy helps you decipher all this kind of stuff.
Well, Neil, one of the main problems that I've run into is the deeper an understanding I get, the more I realize it really is like a pyramid. And the higher you get up in your understanding, the less people actually understand what you're talking about. How do you take people up that progression?
So, like anything else, you have what we used to have in the old days of mystical philosophy was initiation, stages of initiation. So you would have elements for the novice, elements for the adept, and elements for masters. And 9 out of 10 people you ever come across in the street are not even at the novice level. They're not even little embryos floating around. They don't want to know. So you have to kind of put the sign on the door and say, hey, there's various teachers around. There's 50, 100, 500 teachers of great note, whatever we think that number might be. Men and women of great wisdom who can see and share and teach and educate and facilitate and whatnot. And you just have to wait till people show up. I don't believe in mass awakenings. I don't think there's enough people to actually have a mass awakening, frankly. But I do believe that when somebody is ready for the knowledge, they start a sort of very exciting, deep pilgrimage, and then they will find these teachers. They'll find these guides, these, wizards and sorceresses, philosophers, psychologists, whatever it is. So it's always a case of knowing that there's the sort of elementary kind of education, and then the medium education, and then higher up there's a graduate, postgraduate education.
Very well said. Neil, hold right there. Let's pick it up in just a moment. We're speaking with Neil Kramer about the philosophy for living. NeilKramer.com is the website if you want to check it out, ladies and gentlemen. But Neil, we were discussing the progression of the awakening, and the further into my awakening that I get, the more that I start to ponder and philosophize about the balance of this three-dimensional world that we live in. And, of course, everybody wants to change the world. Everyone wants to see something better. Not too many people want to actually do the work and change themselves, which is where the change truly starts to come in. But once you change yourself, then you realize that that's the only thing that you can change, and you can't actually change the world. And thus, it makes me wonder if this world of balance is actually there for that very reason. So individuals change themselves rather than trying to change this entire construct. Your thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, good point. You can only change yourself. You can only awaken yourself. So as I've said years and years and years ago, if you want to fix the world, you've got to fix yourself. If you want to change stuff out there, you've got to change yourself. You cannot affect anything until you've arrived at this basic level of attainment in yourself, which if you do things on your own, you've got no chance. You can do half of it on your own, but you have to get with other people who have those skills, which is why we used to have mystery schools, you know, real solid initiation, powerful men and women teaching each other, sort of the old version of Jedis where all that stuff's really kind of taken from. So it's a discipline, and like any discipline, it requires practice. So having your black belt in metaphysics and in truthful parapolitical awareness requires you to be agile and strong within yourself. You can't do it with just knowledge. So emotional maturity has to be very, very deeply sort of understood in oneself, because you will see, I'm sure, the number of people you speak to, me too, I speak to a lot of people, you will come across people who have great knowledge but also vast egos. And ego blocks knowledge. Ego is an obstacle to higher wisdom. So the man of spirit, the woman of spirit, what they will find is that, number one, you've got to get your ego in place. So you've got to really work on yourself to do that, or you cannot share in the precious jewels of life. You know, the universe will not share its secrets, its wisdom, with the person whose ego is out of whack. And you look around the alternative spheres and you'll see, you know, some great stuff, some fascinating subject matters, but usually very poorly deconstructed because the individuals haven't worked on themselves. They don't know what that means. There's no inner work. They're just kind of doing stuff, saying things, you know, there's just some research or whatever. Whereas when you really dig into it, you know, the real nature of things, it requires somebody who's sharpened themselves, you know, which is my work, attempts to help with that process for sure. But certainly when I look at teachers who bring great wisdom, example, somebody like Rudolf Steiner, I mean, he's gone now. He was dead in 1925, but he's a recent person, and the reason he could see the world so clearly and deconstruct all its mechanisms and understand what was really going on globally with empire, as I call it, which we'll explain what that is in a minute, is because he'd spent half his energy working on himself, not just looking outwards, but getting his home, his work, his relationships, his insight, his empathy, his growth correct, getting them strong in himself. Then he could turn that laser from the inside, the esoteric, to the outside, the exoteric, and see what was around him. So that power of discrimination is really sort of extremely important in this. So you've got to look at the individual. You know, it's not just the message. People say that, hey man, it's just the message, just getting the message out. No, it isn't. I would not consider becoming a student of anybody who cannot embody that wisdom in themselves with strength, with humility, with clarity. It must be embodied. So always when you listen to someone, if you like the words, make it your business to try and determine, ideally, you know, get in front of them and talk to them. Do they embody that wisdom on stage and off stage, on the mic, off the mic, you know, in the kitchen, in the forest? Is it always embodied? Because that's the first mark of the initiate. Do you embody your philosophy, or is it just some words?
Very well said. Now, help us define the ego, because, again, through my journey, I've realized that the idea of the ego has actually transformed as the journey progressed.
Yeah, so, again, great question. Ego is like, its job is survival. So the ego is like a cross between a survivalist, in the best sense of the word, you know, like a sort of... what's his name? You know, the guy in the woods who covers himself in mud with a knife and whatnot. We have a guy in England, Ray Mears, who's a naturalist and a survivalist, a superb, wonderful, wonderful man. Bear Grylls, you have, he's an Englishman, he's on TV. That kind of survivalist who knows how to survive, knows how to build a home, knows how to track and kill a boar, you know, skin it, butcher it, eat it, store it, salt it, knows how to stay sane, knows how to find your way through the desert or the forest when you can't see the horizon. You know, the skills to that survival. And our ego, that's all it's for. It's a survivalist. So it's kind of like in the modern world, it's not quite as necessary as that because of all our creature comforts and technology and electricity and whatnot. So it's more like a sort of caretaker or like a security guard. And its job is just to make sure everything's okay, everything's ticking along, everything's cool, there's nothing weird happening, nothing's going to jump up. And its job usually is super calm, super small, and it can just watch things happen, right? And sometimes if you're a musician, you might bring that to the fore and let that power of the heavenly animal come out and radiate that. Or if you're an actor, you know, you'll play with your ego and you'll pretend that you're fearful or you'll pretend that you're in love. And you get to, you know, modify it, reinvent it and sharpen it and blunt it however you wish. And similarly with a spiritual development in a modern human, the ego must be seen as a vital part of our equipment, our arsenal, our toolkit, but not anything that ever should be at the wheel all the time. Most of the time its job is to sit at the back of the bus and just keep its eyes open, make sure everything's super cool. And very rarely, you know, if that bus goes off the road, it'll jump up to the front and say, okay, let me take over for a second so we don't go over the cliff. But that's very, very rare. If the ego is always at the wheel, as it were, then what happens is you get this inflation of self and this conceitedness, and the universe will hide its wisdom from such people because they haven't found yet the proper place for that ego. So here's a wonderful simple thing you can do. Go in the forest, be there for a week, and your ego will find its proper place within 7 days, guaranteed.
Very well said. I'm glad you cleared that up, Neil, because a lot of people look at the ego as if it's a negative thing. But in actuality, an out-of-control ego is negative because the ego is a vital part to who we are. We'll be right back. Neil, you mentioned the ego, losing the ego. In my journey, and again, I'm speaking about my journey because that's the best journey that I know to speak of because it's my own. I can speak from personal experience when it comes to that. But the journey was destroying the ego and removing it first, then allowing the higher self to rebuild that ego. And once it rebuilt it, then I was able to fully understand who I am. And that's what I try to deliver to the audience out there. But for those people that are out there at the beginning of the journey, where do they start with separating themselves and identifying that ego?
So, as I say, your ego is a survivalist, and it doesn't have much to do most of the time. If you go to Asia, a lot of Asian philosophy, particularly in China and India and Japan, there will be an emphasis on reducing ego, which at the time of the emergence, particularly in India, of Hindu spiritual philosophy was very important. Now it's rather different, and it depends where you are as to what tribal resonance will speak to you. So Asian philosophy, whilst it's brought many great treasures to me, doesn't speak to me with quite the same impact as the Western esoteric traditions. So personally, again, speaking about my journey, my hermetic training in the Mysterium, which is a body of sacred knowledge about what the world is and what it's for and how it works, was designed to help place that ego. So the ultimate way of doing it is to find a group of people who form an order, a school, a group, whatever, and learn from them. So the old way is simple. You would have wise elders who've already done it, embodying that proper egoic placement, which is light and humble and powerful. All those things at the same time, and you would see them. So I guess for someone who can't picture that, we'll go to our earlier model. If you go to a really excellent martial arts school, like I had the great privilege to do in time gone by, the sensei in my karate dojo, Sensei Johnson, was just an awesome man. He was the most powerful man in the whole of Manchester, right, in England at the time. I'm in Oregon, USA now, but going back a bit. And yet the quietest, the most humble. strong and yet very, very subtle in delivery. And when we went on, social gatherings, he would always be, just having to prove nothing, having to say nothing, but enjoying himself and being there and awesome. And you'd have to kind of persuade him to open up. You'd have to ask him, you'd have to get him into a certain thing because he had no desire to exhibit or demonstrate anything whatsoever. And that has an effect on everyone around you by this process called induction, which means that just proximity to that person, energetically you start to learn he's cool, he's super cool, super powerful, and yet he has no need to amplify that or beat his chest with it. It's just there. We all see it week in, week out, but no necessity for display. And so all the younger students over the years start to get that and think, Sensei Johnson, wow, that thing that he does is super cool, and they start to do it for themselves. So you teach by example, and you make sure that within your spiritual tribe, whatever its nature, there is that positive, excellent hierarchy based not on blood, not on degree, but on pure personal attainment. And then people start to learn by it and think, wow, that's cool. So he can turn the power up when he needs to. Boy, oh boy, he sure can. But yet when he needs to be very quiet and tender and just super placid, super serene, tranquil, he is. He's more tranquil than anyone else. So the most powerful man that we know and the most tranquil man, all in one person. And you cannot help but be impressed by that. So go back to my earlier comment, embody the wisdom.
What do you think about psychedelics? Ayahuasca, for instance. That's a tool that a lot of people have been utilizing lately. We've had many DMT researchers on who spoke very highly of it. Your thoughts on removing the ego and embarking upon this path through ancient ceremonies like that?
So psychedelics, entheogens, let's call them plant medicine. It's medicine, right? So it should be considered as such and treated as such. It's not something for anybody that should be part of a staple diet. And it can do things in terms of acceleration for sure. And it's a very potent tool, again, in the modern spiritual student's toolkit. And it would be unfair to leave that out, to say, forget it, don't worry about it. What I say, this is this super fast and dirty version, for students who've done a good amount of basic work on themselves, an excellent tool. For students who've not done much and are in a bit of a mess, stay well away from it, because it's just going to open up more things inside yourself, more issues, more problems. So the big challenge with that is finding the right environment and the right practitioners, which is very difficult. I only know of 3. One's just come to me in January from a colleague, and 2 that I've known before. So most places you go to, the plant medicine is kind of like a lightning conductor, right? And what you're asking yourself is, well, who's helping us do this? Who's going to help with the integration? Who's going to caretake? Who's holding the space? What does it mean, So there's a whole human element to the plant medicine, which if that's left out, you're just kind of like waiting to see what happens when that lightning strikes. And I've seen more cases of problems from ayahuasca, and other sort of psychotropic substances, psilocybin, whatever, crystal DMT, or, peyote. I've seen more problems than I've seen successes. And all of those have just been because the student was unwisely guided and saw it as a bit of a sort of silver bullet that could really help them. And they went into it with the best of intentions, but took bad advice and ended up with more trouble than they started with.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that, on the more trouble?
So most people are imbalanced, and they go to find balance in themselves or clarity through the plant. So the plant says, okay, this is how I see the world because I'm connected to everything. So I'll show you one perspective that can help. But if your imbalance is beyond a certain point, you cannot see what the plant is showing you. It gets distorted by your own ego, your own psyche. So you have to be at a certain threshold of clarity and cleanliness and strength within yourself, which can easily be determined by spending a little bit of time with a person and saying, okay, you've got these 10 things that are all preying on you in life. You need to eliminate a good 5 or 6 of them before you go near that, or it's just going to add more confusion, more trouble, and you won't be able to integrate its message. You'll just have funny dreams.
That actually makes sense. You unlock a lot of childhood trauma, suppressed memories, things like that. Without the proper context of knowing how to deal with it, it can really cause more problems. Very wise words by Neil Kramer. We'll be right back. Neil, since we're on the topic of DMT, ayahuasca, let's talk about the journeys beyond the threshold gathering, kind of synchronistic with the topic of DMT, at least in my view.
Sure. So I do a sort of annual, big gathering, a seminar, and I've been doing it for a long time. And this year, we are going to be meeting in September 23rd, 24th, 25th, which is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, September 2016, over at the Omega Institute in upstate New York. And it's really a place of great fellowship for me, because I went there for the first time last year, and they did a great job. So I've done this event all over the place, and I'm one of the least commercially minded people in the whole universe. So I don't usually talk about my stuff hardly ever, but it's a wonderful opportunity to discuss serious metaphysical issues, serious parapolitical things, focus on ourselves, making ourselves stronger. But the main thing, apart from me stood up for the weekend, educating and entertaining people, which is awesome, and I'll do a great job because I love it. But the main thing is the people. The quality of people who come to that is super sky high, high caliber, amazing men and women who come to that and form all kinds of amazing alliances and become deep friends and share this knowledge, because the material that I cover really only attracts people who are very serious about transforming themselves. So you get a certain sort of person who comes, I have to say, if I don't blow my own trumpet, but it's very, very good. We've been doing it for ages. We did last time. It was, a super, super event. And we had lots of people come along. We did lots of different ones. Knowing the Mystery, the last time was called Alchemy of Will, Esoteric Roots, Unfoldment, Secrets and Sinks. So this time, the gathering is called Journeys Beyond the Threshold. And it's really just a wonderful facility they've got up there at Omega. So I teach my stuff on their site, but it's totally my stuff. I do whatever I want. They just host it. And it's like 2 hours north of the city, up in the Hudson River Valley, so it's like the English countryside, rolling hills, all that. So we're not downtown with all the glass and concrete and, chromium or whatever. That's okay, but we're not. It's not there. So we're in this beautiful pastoral rural location where you can not only do the study work with me and have that tuition if you wish, but you can also just hang out. You can walk around, walk by the lake, gather with people, and then in the evenings we get together and we eat and we drink wine and we smoke our cigars and have a really wonderful time. So you ask most people in the fields of operation that you guys and me work in what the number one problem is, this is what they'll say: well, I'm all alone. It's isolated. I don't see people enough. So this kind of event is designed to change that and say, okay, it's not just a conference, it's not just a workshop, it's a gathering of people who come together in a serious way. And so it's a lot of fun, but it also forms the basis of something more important, which is to find that fellowship, not just to hang out and take some notes and go and get a DVD copy or whatever, but to actually be part of something physically, to have that, as we said before, that induction, to meet men and women who are further along than you, and to meet men and women who are not as far as you. And there you are, perfectly placed right in the middle, being in a space where you can inspire others And then you yourself, we ourselves, can aspire to some of the more advanced people there. And everyone's just super cool. You know what I mean? It's just an amazing opportunity to inquire into deep things, to share stories, to talk, to hang out, and it's just a wonderful thing. So September the 23rd to the 25th, 2016. So you can go to neilkramer.com, click on the events button at the top, and you'll see that. And it's just a great, great weekend. You would not be disappointed if you came along, I assure you.
Excellent, excellent. If you don't mind me asking you personally about your personal experiences,
yeah, anything.
Can you share some of your ayahuasca journeys or some of the levels that you've been able to achieve, particularly with contacting divinity through the use of entheogens?
Yeah, so I won't say that it's ayahuasca. That's not my particular vibe, although I have tried it a number of times and had many positive things. The substances that the individual would use are always an extremely personal choice. But let's say that, that divinity, from Latin divinos, just of God, or, it used to mean ecclesiastical or theologian in the late 14th century. It is traditional to consider a mystic as someone who experiences or strives to experience a direct personal encounter with divinity, with a higher transcendental force that brings great opening, essentially, great wisdom, ecstasy, union, you might say, with Source, with God. For me personally, I'll give you, a personal story. Last time I partook of a powerful medicine, which is very rare, once or twice a year, if that, very rare. I use it for breakthrough and healing rather than pure discovery. This was a breakthrough moment where I was on the verge of something, but I couldn't get there. I needed assistance. Took the medicine in the right setting, with the right conditions, with the body purified, with the mind in a healthy state, and had this incredible experience of this Nordic woman come into the room behind me, put her arms around me. So she came up to me and embraced me, but from the back. So she put her arms around my chest as I'm looking forward and she's behind me. And I could feel her. She's like 8 foot tall. She was rather like Galadriel, from Lord of the Rings. And she just said, all your striving and all your perceptions and all your words and philosophy, fantastic, but everything's okay. The world is on track, and we are dissolving all the things that need to go, and everything is proceeding to the next earth changes, which will be beautiful and purifying. And just relax. Just relax. There's nothing you need to do. Just relax. You are loved. You are loved. And there was just this deep, profound sense of okayness, of goodness, that all the darkness and fragmentation in the world is largely illusory, and even that unpleasant dream of fragmentation, of distortion, of the virus, the tainted virus, is going away. And I just felt it in my bones in the embrace from this woman. And she was from the north, as my people are Nordic from the north. I don't mean the Britons necessarily, but most people who look like me come from a certain place. Esoterically speaking, that is. We're going pre-Atlantean here, so it's a bit off the charts. But she was one of those beings, and I don't do this stuff. This is not something for me. I'm not like Mr. Channeler or Mr. Arcturian, Pleiadian, Gateway man. I'm not. I'm very flesh and bones, in the dirt, blood on my face, rifle on my back, right? That's me. So this is way off for me, and yet I needed that contact. So in she came, into the room, into what I was doing in this space. Very unexpected. I was expecting to go out, but something came in. And it was a gift in many ways, because it allowed me to sort of take my foot off the accelerator and concentrate less on knowing and knowledge and more on being, and being in the space that I'm in, which really sort of helped to solidify for me that being always beats knowing, but you have to have both, just in equal measure, just as we were talking about things earlier. So she certainly was a presence that was very, very off-world, not part of my kind of dreamscape at all. Never seen anything like this. Don't dream of it. Don't have pictures of it. Not my thing. And she came in, and it was a incredibly compassionate and enfolding kind of tenderness that just totally absorbed me. And when I came through it, there were tears down my cheeks. It was a very, very moving experience.
Wow, that is incredible. NeilKramer.com is the website, ladies and gentlemen. And Neil, you touched upon something, the virus. I've been made very aware of this virus in my travels as well. I want to talk to you about that right on the other side on the True Frequency exclusive segment. Neil Kramer is still on with us for the True Frequency exclusive segment. And Neil, first of all, let me ask you this. What was the particular medicine that you were taking when you had this experience?
Salvia divinorum.
Ah, beautiful. I have had a couple of encounters with salvia. My particular plant of choice, of course, is the ayahuasca. I've used, the salvia I went back to a couple of times, but I never really found it as in-depth as the ayahuasca. But I was given the message of the virus, and that we are living essentially in a construct that is out of balance by this dark virus.
You bet. Just before we go into that for a minute, when George comes on, is it on live after me?
Yes.
Yes.
Say hello to him, because I've not seen him for ages, and I like old Georgie boy. He's a good lad. You'll have a great show with him. But say hello to him from me. Say it on air as well. You watch him laugh. He'll enjoy that.
Excellent. He actually
did say the same about you.
A minute ago and said, "Please tell him hi for me."
He's a good lad, George, I'll tell you. He has a very good ego in very good shape, so that makes his work all the better. So, virus, right? Hermetic principle number 1, really. The all is mind, right? So the universe is a mental construct, okay? So it is a thought form, a giant, complex, evolving, ever-refining thought form, okay? Very powerful and important idea in modern mystical philosophy. The world is a thought, not a collection of things, not a world of objects, a thought. And our old friend Parmenides, the old Greek philosopher, unknown really, like Socrates who came after him, we only have a few scraps of stuff from him. He actually only wrote one poem, which he called On Nature, and some of his material is in that. However, what we do know from him, from his other students, is that he felt that there was a very important thing that everyone was missing, which is this isn't made of things, it's made of thought. So he put forward something very interesting. How valid his thoughts are, it's hard to say because we've only got other people's word for it. But Parmenides was one of the first people to put forward a basic ontological structure of reality. Ontology just being the study of being, right? So primal and metaphysical existence come together in this thought. And he said that because nothing comes from nothing, existence must be eternal, right? So I know this is a bit sort of off the page, but bear with me for 2 seconds. So what we can extrapolate from that is that existence cannot come into being nor disappear. Everything is unchangeable, right? Not infinite. And Parmenides said, imagine reality is a sphere, which is a whole other story. We'll do that some other time. But this means that the sort of changes we perceive in our day-to-day life, going to the post office, eating dinner, growing old, watching the clouds move over our heads every day, are totally illusory, total illusion. And what we're seeing is a thought form in flux in accordance with our own thoughts. So the virus is a diminishing thought form. The virus is the removal of self-authority. It is the product of disavowal of self-determining human beings who no longer create in the world. So when you add the mystical layer to this, moving beyond the words of just our old Greek friend, these are my words now. We live in a thought of God. The world is a thought, just like a dream. And the consistency of the dream is very remarkable, isn't it? Every day it looks kind of the same. And that constancy and regularity is powered and held in place by the sun. The sun, that big, massive yellow ball in the sky. The sun is a divine agency. It knows us. It can read our mind. It knows when we were born. It's with us every day. It touches us every single day, physically touches us all the time. And it creates this world. So it's sort of like a giant reflector of consensus thinking, but key this, not in quantity, in quality. So 7.4 billion people here, most of them stupid. Sorry, most of them stupid. And nothing bad will happen because of that, because they don't contribute to the texture of the world thought. But if a few thousand deep-thinking, true-hearted human beings think new thoughts, then the entire world shifts, big style, right? And this is a very exciting and beautiful part of the work that I do and examine and teach and discuss and refine. But the virus is a final attempt to disempower even those people. So even the people with the self-power and self-determination to create new worlds, even they are being assailed on all sides by this attempt to basically depress them and to make them insane and to give them confusion and to send them to, diversion, distraction, escape, suicide, drugs, whatever. Just a final attempt to take the intelligent, sensitive human being offline. And all it is a persuasion of futility. So the virus is about disavowal and futility. It cannot do anything to us unless we lose hope. So it's just like a sort of old fairy tale. It's just a tiny, subtle thing, but it is doing its work. So most of the billions of people on this planet have already resigned themselves to destruction, which will happen. That will happen to those people. And if you do that, then you've taken the virus in and it's taken over. What you have to do is take the virus in and transmute that mother, right? You can't transmute pain while it's on the outside. You have to bring it into the laboratory of oneself. So everyone tries to keep pain on the outside, negativity. No, bring it in, transmute it. Not everyone can do it, but you can transmute it. Just like the alchemist would bring something in his laboratory, bring fire to it and purify it, deconstruct it, reduce it to its basic elements, and then it loses all its power, all its potency, and you become master of that virus, and you can turn it back on itself. So instead of it being a virus that, eats the world hard drive, it becomes a so-called dove virus, D-O-V-E, which spreads harmony and optimism and a sense of power, that we have to do this ourselves. The whole thing with what I call empire, it's a trick. We have to do it ourselves. So empire pushes us to the sort of brink of extinction, and it's teaching us to say, you have to organize this stuff yourself, guys. So the ultimate esoteric lesson in empire, this evil empire, it's our own conjuration. It came to life, invoked from we ourselves. It is an adversary that comes into being when we need a reminder that we must rule ourselves to create and cultivate spiritual truth in society at large. And when we don't do that, and time goes by, we generate this bloody awful spectre of empire, corporatism and illuminism and this and that and negative occult groups. And as I say, it drives us right to the edge of the cliff until finally you stand there with your toes hanging over the edge of the cliff, right? And you think, no, not doing that anymore. And that no is a resounding fist in the face to empire. So our avowal and our negation of the virus is all it takes. Nothing can overcome the will of a human. Nothing. Only the will of the human itself.
Very well said, Neil. Wow. I wish we had another hour because we can go in so many different directions. We're going to have to get you back on the broadcast very, very soon. Thank you so much for your time this evening. NeilKramer.com, the website, ladies and gentlemen. That's Kramer with a K.